Welcome back, boys and girls. In Chapter 32, Kingsley and Hopeful had escaped the darkness of the dungeon, but the memory of Paranoid Castle still clung to them like a shadow. As they hurried back toward the King's pathway, their bodies were weak, but their hearts were strangely stronger than before. The meadow behind them was quiet now, yet the lessons they had learned in that terrible place echoed loudly in their minds. For it had not merely been a prison of stone and iron. The dungeon had been a prison of doubt, fear, and despair. The boys began to understand that their capture by the giant Cynical was not simply a matter of wandering onto the wrong land. It had begun much earlier, when weariness led them to seek ease instead of pressing forward on the King's road. One small step away from the path had led them into a storm, and the storm had led them straight into the hands of an enemy who thrived in darkness. Now, as the boys walked forward, they realized something important. The dungeon had tried to steal their hope, but instead, it had taught them how precious hope truly was. And so their journey continued, not as careless pilgrims, but as travelers who had learned that even when the road grows dark, the King has already provided a way of escape.
Journey to the Eternal Kingdom, Chapter 33. How long does peace last? The boys ran and did not slow down until they found their way back to the steps that had first led them onto the path that had almost become their end. Only then did they sit down to catch their breath. There they sat and discussed how to prevent other pilgrims from falling into the same trap.
We have to warn others and tell them they must stay on the straight and narrow path no matter how hard it gets.
You're right. We have to.
Let's go.
I think we need to erect a sign that warns other pilgrims not to be tempted, as I was, to leave the smooth path,
declared Kingsley. So together they looked around and found a large, smooth stone. Slowly, taking their time to make sure they did it right, they wrote on the stone, "Stay on the straight and narrow. The meadow is the private land of the giant Cynical, who serves the evil prince." Once the boys were done, they rolled the stone closer to the stairs so it would be hard to miss, before anyone made the almost fatal decision they had made. Saying a prayer that none of the prince's servants would see and remove the sign, the boys walked on. By this time, it was close to noon, and they were hungry because of how little they had been fed in the dungeon. However, feeling the warmth of the sun, the gentle breeze, and the sunlight revived them greatly. So they walked on slowly, looking around.
What a beautiful view! And those hills, oh! I see the way of the King leads over those hills or mountains.
I think it is the Delectable Mountains I was told about, if memory serves me correctly. We can find some food to eat there, and there are kind shepherds who live there. It is their custom to help weary travelers.
Soon, the boys realized they were climbing the Delectable Mountains as their breathing became labored. As they turned a corner, they saw a few shepherds at the top of the mountain feeding their flocks and standing by the way of the King. The shepherds hailed them, and the boys approached cautiously, until they drew closer and saw the warmth on the faces of the shepherds.
Hello, young man, welcome.
Seeing the boys' condition, they knew right away what had taken place. Without saying a word, they invited the boys into their tents. There, they picked fruits from the trees nearby and gathered other wholesome food, sharing it with the boys. They refreshed their bottles with cool, clean water and, using leaves from the trees, cleaned, bound, and bandaged their wounds. After the boys had eaten their fill and their strength was somewhat regained, the shepherds told them to rest and not to be afraid. They were safe there, for this was the way of the King, and on this mountain the evil prince and his servants were not allowed. The boys laid their heads down, and before you could count to 10, they were fast asleep. They slept straight through until the next morning. When they awoke, the shepherds were already up and about. They provided the boys with more wholesome food to help them regain their strength. Once the boys were finished eating, a few of the shepherds sat down and began speaking with them.
This mountain belongs to the good King and his son. It is called Emmanuel Land. All these sheep are his, and we are his servants.
We have seen only a few pilgrims escape the dungeon of Giant Cynical. You are fortunate.
Kingsley and Hopeful blushed, Kingsley the more so. They then told the shepherds of their ordeal and how they had escaped. They also told them of the warning message they had left for other pilgrims, so they would not fall into the same trap. The shepherds listened without interrupting, sometimes nodding and sometimes shaking their heads as they heard the story.
You are the first pilgrims to share your experience with us about your time with the giant. Thank you for being so honest and truthful, and for caring about others so that they may not make the same mistake you did.
You are on the right path once again, and we pray that you remain on this path.
So this is the way to the eternal kingdom?
Do we have much farther to go? The way to the eternal kingdom, and how long it takes, is determined by each pilgrim.
Is the way ahead safe or dangerous?
This journey is laden and fraught with danger. But be comforted by the words of the King's Son when he walked upon the earth.
John 16:33. These things I have spoken unto you, that in me ye might have peace. In the world ye shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world.
The boys nodded their heads. The shepherds then asked if they understood what that meant.
I think it means that because of the sin of our forefathers, we will always have to fight our carnal nature. And the enemy of our king and his followers will never leave us alone. He will always try to set snares that would cause our feet to stumble. So, because the enemy is alive, we will always have dangers to overcome.
This is the perfect spot. Yeah, it's so peaceful. Look at this fire is perfect tonight. Yeah, feels like an adventure. Reminds me of stories from long ago. Tell us one. All right, once in these very hills there was a great adventure. The fire teaches us to keep going, even when it's dark. It's beautiful. How do you keep it so bright? Look at the sparks. Just a little care, like life. All you who hope in the Lord. Psalm 31:24.
Adam and Eve in Eden. In the beginning, God made the world full of beauty and life. He created the first man, Adam, in his own image. God placed Adam in a perfect garden called Eden. Everything there was beautiful beyond imagination. Tall trees filled the garden, heavy with delicious fruit. Flowers of every color covered the ground like a living carpet. The air was fresh and full of life. Birds filled the sky with joyful songs. There was no sickness. There was no sadness. There was no death. Adam ruled over every living creature God had made. He cared for the garden and enjoyed the work God had given him. But God knew Adam should not live alone. So he created Eve. When Adam saw her, his heart was filled with joy. Together, they lived in peace and happiness in Eden. God allowed them to eat from every tree in the garden, but there was one tree they must never eat from. It was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. God warned them, "If you eat from that tree, you will surely die." One day, Eve wandered near that tree. Its fruit looked beautiful and delicious. Suddenly, a serpent of burnished gold spoke to her. "Did God really say you cannot eat from the trees of the garden?" Eve answered, "We may eat from every tree except this one. If we eat it, we will die." But the serpent said, "You will not surely die. God knows that when you eat it, your eyes will be opened. You will become like God, knowing good and evil." Eve looked again at the fruit. It seemed good to eat. It seemed beautiful. And it seemed like it would make her wise. So she took the fruit and ate it. Then she gave the fruit to Adam, and he hesitated for a second, but then he ate it too. In that moment, everything changed. The peace they once felt disappeared. Shame and fear filled their hearts. Because they had disobeyed God, they could no longer remain in Eden. Angels were placed at the gates of the garden with a flaming sword, and the way to the tree of life was guarded. Adam and Eve left their beautiful home. But even then, God did not stop loving them, and his plan to save humanity had already begun.